Hi and welcome to School Shorts with me, Melissa Chan Green, journalist and mum of two with a passion for education. And in this episode we are speaking with a leading expert in literacy education, Lorraine Hammond. If you have ever wondered why your child might be able to read a word and not spell it, then this should answer some of those questions. If you're interested in how teaching instruction in classroom might have changed since you were at school, then hopefully this will also shed some light on that. Lorraine Hammond, thank you so much for being with us.
It's my pleasure, Mel. Thank you.
I mentioned spelling there in the introduction, and I think a lot of people, myself included, think that if your child is reading, then that would naturally flow on that they're going to be able to spell the word. But I have recently learnt that that is actually not the case, and that they're taught quite differently, aren't they?
Well, I think that the first thing we need to establish is that reading is complex, spelling is complex, and more so, and writing is even harder. So if you think about the human brain and the impost we place on it, spelling puts a lot of demand on the human brain. Reading is relatively easy in the sense that there are clues. Ideally, of course, we want children to systematically decode a word because that's going to help them in the long run with spelling as well. But there are more clues. If you're going to spell a word, it's you and your pencil. And if you're not good at forming letters, that's another level of challenge as well. So when you think about the complexity of spelling, there's a bit going on. So how about I get you to spell a word?
Oh, God, okay.
You can write it down if you want to.
Okay, yeah.
Sometimes people like to write it down and they think that they might help them to remember how to spell it. But this is possibly a word that you've never heard before. So people can play along at home. The word is asafoetida. I want you to go to the store and buy me some asafoetida to put in the curry. Asafoetida.
Okay, what
have you got?
I've gone with ASCER.
Oh, hang on, stop. ASA. Let's keep it simple.
Oh, ASA.
ASA.
Okay.
What did you put at the end?
PHOTIDA.
Oh, okay. Oh, well.
Oh, gosh. Well, this isn't going well for me.
No, TIDA is good.
Okay,
the only slight problem we've got, and what you've just beautifully illustrated, Mel, is that there's a lot going on with spelling. So step one, if you have never seen the word before, you have to use your ears. You have to hear the word. I only said it twice. Typically people go, what? And they want to hear it again because you have to break that word asafoetida down into sounds, and then you have to match those sounds with your understanding of print. Now, it's not English, so you made a very typical error. In fact, 95% of people, when I ask them to do this, will put PH, okay? And it's not, it's FOE. Now, the reason for that is it's not an English word, but it beautifully illustrates the fact that because behind the scenes in our brain we have a vast lexical storehouse of knowledge which is accumulated over time, largely through reading and paying attention to the letters and sounds in words. So dolphin, elephant have the sound in the middle. So your brain said, well, spelling is a game of probability and chance. The probability was it was going to be PH. Now, if you put FOE, that's terrific. You've probably seen the word before. But if not, if you're relying on your ears, you'll go F, and there's a logic to that. So what does this tell us about early spelling? Well, no doubt you might have a little one at home who decides to write something for you. Gone are the days when you can go to the bank and leave your child at a desk and they can fill in forms. We don't have that anymore. But when children pick up a pen or a pencil and they try to write something down, that is one of the most encouraging early signs that literacy is going to be okay. Because if they can hear sounds in that word. So one of my friends, just before I came, showed me a text that of a picture her daughter had written, and it said, I am sick. And it said S-I-C. No C-K at the end. She doesn't know that yet. But she'd heard the sounds. She'd gone sick, s. And using her understanding of the alphabet, she'd been able to write it down. And that's called invented spelling. And that's a very good sign. So if you have an older child who perhaps throws letters on a page, and research has actually describe it in that way. And there's no system, there's no order, there's no sense of hearing sounds. That would be a concern for you as a parent.
So when you're speaking with your child about their writing and say they have written I am sick, S-I-C, then you should be looking at that as a kind of positive
let's talk about how old they are.
Like,
if this is a 3 or a 4-year-old, and this is my friend's child is 4, this is a very good sign.
Yeah.
And you would say, that is terrific. Look, I am sick. And I would not be concerned to tell them that CK goes at the end of words and is followed by a short vowel.
Yeah.
That would be too much and irrelevant. What's most important is that they are engaging with the sounds of the language and they've understood that English is an alphabetic language. Now, we need to be kind to children because while there is plenty of regularity with the English language, there are issues. And, of course, Anglo-Saxon words are the lowest level of language. And there's some tricky words in there like A-R-E. Nobody can explain why it's spelt the way that it is, but it is. So we need to be mindful that when children first come into school, they're going to encounter lots of these Anglo-Saxon words. And so we need to cue them into the fact that, the most common way of making the letter C is K. But, of course, sometimes it says S. Okay, but we'll leave that for later,
yes,
as in circus. And CH, mostly when you're little, says Ch. And then, of course, when you get a bit older and you get to the French level of language, it's sh for champagne. And then it's k for chemical.
Yeah, chorus.
So, over time, as children move their way through primary school, they encounter, as they get older and they read, if you like, different levels of words, the more complex nature of the English language. So it is a polyglot, which means that it's a combination of lots of languages. We've also got strange rules, like English words don't end in V. That's why we have an E on the end of love. You might have thought it was something to do with the E talking to the O and saying its name, if you know that spelling rule.
Yes, but then it would be
I love you, which would be wrong. Okay, that would be wrong.
Yes.
So there are lots of little rules along the way. And I think as a parent, I'm always mindful of putting too much on parents and saying that what would be best is to be encouraging and look for evidence of, does it sort of make sense? Have they had a go at writing something down based on what they can hear? Because that is a very good indicator that that a fundamental skill called phoneme segmentation is there.
Right.
Research on the ability to hear sounds and isolate them in words tells us that if you can't do that, you're going to have trouble with both reading and spelling. So not only is it correlational, it's causal, which means if you're not good at it, there's going to be a problem down the track. So that's one of the first signs to actually look for. Of course, thinking about handwriting, and cognitive load. So let's make it hard for this child. Let's get them to hold a sentence in their head. Capital letter I am, not too bad, sick, sick. Suddenly you're having to hold all those sounds, form all those letters, and know that CK goes at the end of words before a short vowel. So we gently introduce these rules to children, and we introduce the ones that work, and we introduce them in the most generalisable form as well. So we don't say E goes away when in comes to stay. We talk about the fact that any morphograph or ending or suffix, prefix or suffix in a word that starts in a vowel, is probably going to have some issues connecting to the base word. So in time we teach this.
So as a parent, I guess, if you're seeing your child come home and attempt this and being able to sound it out, then that's a good thing. And the spelling rules that you're talking about, you're saying don't worry too much as a parent, because actually teachers are taking them through that in a specific
Well, you should see,
order
if you
as
look at the
well.
words, because that's a real clue to what's happening at school. Have a look at the words that are coming home. If your child is reading Charlotte's Web, and there are lots of words about web and spider that are coming home, then you'd have to wonder. I would assume that that's coming from a meaning-based approach. So the idea is we're going to be reading this story. So what we need to do is to provide lots of opportunities to engage with words associated with that story. Some words like Charlotte are really hard to read and spell. Web is very easy. Now, depending on the age of the child, I would prefer to see a list of words that all had the short sound in them. Web, shed, and so on. And they would typically go from pretty easy, web, right the way through to much harder words that just had that consistent pattern.
Yes.
Because in order to do the PH thing, okay, that you did so well at the beginning, you have to have a neat set of lists of words effectively in your brain that you can draw from.
Right. So it's about learning spelling patterns rather than learning groups of words that relate to a topic.
That's right. And it's also about keeping the oil and water away from each other. So, for example, I would teach E as in tree, and there would be a list of words that would appear. And then maybe a week or two later, we'd do E as in tea. Because, as in the tea we drink, because there's no positional frequency rule. There are a couple of useful rules. So we know that OI goes in the middle of words or in the word oil at the beginning, and OY goes at the end of words. AY goes at the end of words, AI goes at the beginning or in the middle of words. So because there's no rule for that, a well-structured sequence for instruction would say, well, let's just keep these things apart. Let's not say to the children, hey, guess what, there's 10 ways of making the E sound, and there probably are and more. Let's meter them out so that we do the most common first, the most useful first.
And you
we'll
really get your head around that.
We'll provide a little pattern and we'll say, come on, let's learn this. And then, of course, we know that we're not once done and dusted. We'll have to go back and do it again.
Yeah.
So I would expect to see a list coming home, and then there would be a list in review where they would keep turning up periodically, because otherwise, of course, children will forget.
I'm thinking about parents and adults who might think that they have got through perfectly okay with spelling not being their strong point. And I'm guessing that as a child, if you're not having to think about spelling words, if it's coming naturally, then that's going to come back to what you're talking about, cognitive load, and freeing up time and space to think about your writing. Is that kind of the benefit of being able to spell naturally? Well,
I think perhaps rather than, I wouldn't say naturally in the sense that it's unnatural, but it's a skill and you've learnt it. It's something that you've mastered. So if you think about the complexity of writing, so what do we do when we write? Well, we've got to have an idea, we've got to structure a sentence, we've got to worry about grammar, commas, full stops. If you want to be clever, we can put in a positive in there. We can really start to change up that sentence structure. So if you think about spelling as I do as a secretarial skill, so it's one of the secretarial skills of life. If you have already got those words sitting neatly in your long-term memory, when you come to write or type, if you're an adult and you're a touch typist, so I can bang out my fingers and brain are at one with each other. I'm a much slow hand writer, but it's just automatic. That is coming straight from my long-term memory. So that's not bothering the composition, the fact that I'm trying to craft something when I'm writing. Yeah. So what we try and do is to say, well, let's get handwriting automatic. Let's get capitalisation automatic. Let's know that we need basic sentences have a capital letter, one idea, in punctuation. If that's automatic, if spelling words is automatic, if access to not only the spelling of the words but different types of vocabulary, which rather than saying I was happy, I was ecstatic, I was euphoric. If I can spell all those words, and suddenly they all come in and the creativity can bubble away quietly, and we're just bringing in that information.
Right.
If children can't spell words, they will grind to a halt. They will write things like in there, if they do writing on a Monday morning, they'll say, on the weekend I played soccer. And that will be it, because it's a safe sentence. And they roughly know how to spell it.
Mm-hmm. Even though their idea might be, I played soccer and I got a goal, and they might think, well, I don't know how to spell goal.
And that's also, and they will say to you, Mel, they'll say, oh, and I'll say, what are you going to write about? And I've tested hundreds of children, and I would say, oh, I did this and I did that. Then they would write something like, I played soccer. Oh, okay, that's telling you something, because it is constraining if you don't have, and spelling is such a public thing. When you read, even if you botch it up, publicly, if you read something, it's gone. But spelling is permanent, and it's there. Okay, and it's really effortful for children to do. So automatising spelling as a part of the overall writing process is really critical.
So do you find that a lot of students are nervous about spelling, or because of what you're saying about it being such a, visible show of your ability? Do you get students that are quite nervous, and is that a reason that in classrooms it needs to be kind of a particular focus?
Oh, I think that if taught well, and of course we have young people in schools who are anxious, and it's a very visible display if they're not very good and they perceive that they're not very good. And I would hope the teachers would be kind and not necessarily display their work, because we don't need to make it worse for them. We also need to accept that children do develop along a continuum. Some may be superstar spellers from the beginning, that's terrific. Others will take a little bit longer. I would hate to think that a child would be afraid to produce a better word or attempt a better word for fear that they perhaps couldn't spell it. So then that comes down to how we then support that child. So if a child has got a word that's phonetically, it kind of works, but it's not right, that's a great error. And that's an opportunity to say, hey, well done, you got all the sounds there. Let me help you to understand that, this crazy English language does a few funny things here, and let me show you. So I think that we have to accept that while we can provide excellent instruction, it will still be hard for children. And I would love to see a child try to write the word ecstatic because they knew that word rather than happy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's turn to how this is actually taught. And there are teachers listening, but for parents, I think the benefit of understanding how something is taught in class is because it's probably changed from how we were taught as parents. So it's nice to kind of have some understanding as to why it has changed.
Well, I think we've got better at teaching in general. I think certainly when I went to school, I think the class sizes seemed a bit bigger, I'm not sure. And I'm sure we did sit in rows for a while, and I think that was mainly to control behaviour. These days, we in a classroom, say if we were looking at a spelling lesson or a spelling time in the timetable, in the classrooms that I work in, it would be very teacher-directed. The understanding would be that this is hard, and I am going to explain a rule to you or a generalisation to you, like CK lives at the end of words. Okay, C and K are married, and I have little stories that go with that. So I would be teaching that directly. An alternative way to do that would be to have children in groups, maybe sorting words, which means that they might be able to sort them into piles, but they wouldn't understand necessarily what the rule was. So because we understand that spelling is tricky and it's hard for the human brain to do, we need to teach it explicitly. So what that means is the teacher is saying, okay, in this instance, and there's many instances where children are indeed the expert, but the children here are the novice, and I am the expert, and my job is to unfold the intricacies of the English language over so many years of primary school without killing anybody, not confusing them, and giving them multiple opportunities to practice and consolidate the skills. So as I said at the beginning, we wouldn't say, oh, look, and by the way, the letter C and the letter G sometimes change depending on who they're set next to. We just leave that. We would teach the most common sound first. We would teach rules like CK going at the end of words, because that's something that always occurs. So we would teach lots of rules that occur a lot in the words that children would be writing and reading. And then gradually over time we would say, okay, well, let's teach you something about the endings of words and how they change the meaning of the word. We call them morphographs, and how they have to join on to the base word and change the spelling. So over time that would unfold. So being teacher-led, we would see lots of opportunity for practice, and just remembering that no one's died of practice. It's okay. We need lots of practice to get good at it. So providing that opportunity for practice is critical. It doesn't need to take very long to do this, but we do need regular routines around spelling. If we let children choose their own words to spell, certainly my son would have loved to spell the word Stegosaurus, but there's very little use for that in his day-to-day writing. So by teachers taking control and saying these are the words that we're going to spell, and rather than spelling words associated with Charlotte's Web, because somehow we think that maybe if they're reading the novel, then maybe they'll be more interested in writing the words, there's just no phonic patterns there for their brain to grab onto.
Right, yeah. And I guess if you're, with Stegosaurus, you're then going to go, okay, I'm going to have to teach that AU is or, and that might not be the point that they're up to. So it's about, as you say, putting those spelling patterns in a sequence that is
and
relative.
also I guess the other thing too is that people then resort to look, cover, write, check, which is quite an antiquated approach to teaching spelling, assumes that spelling is a visual memory skill. So if you've ever spelled a word and thought, oh, that doesn't look right, well, you are trying to call on your visual memory, but you have to have something in there first. So teaching that as an initial strategy is not effective. The human brain has to recognise the sequence of letters in words and then attach sounds to them for reading. So the same applies to spelling. The more you focus on the sequence of letters, the more the brain automatises that word and then can instantaneously spell it.
I'm quite interested in when you talk about explicit teaching. This is kind of a teacher saying this is the right answer first up, isn't it?
Teach first, yeah.
Teach first. And I've been thinking about this in terms of when I was at school and sometimes, had my attention wandering everywhere. And, if the teacher would say, who knows the answer to this? And then all the kids putting up their hands and giving their ideas, like I'm certain I would have walked away sometimes just remembering the wrong answer that my neighbour might have given because my brain got stuck on focusing on that as an interesting answer. So is the idea of explicit teaching to kind of cut that kind of out a little bit?
Yeah, and it's really hard because teachers are altruistic people. They're lovely people, and they want to elicit from the children. Now, I can elicit from you, how's your day been? That's okay. But if I then say to you, who can tell me a word where this spelling rule applies? Well, if you know, your hand shoots up and you're speaking. And then if you know, I'm really relieved because someone's remembered. But there's a whole bunch of kids in the class who possibly don't even know what I'm talking about. And that equates to loss of time. I see it all the time in the classrooms that I go into. I was in a classroom recently where one of my pre-service teachers was in a room with 60 children. It was a combined class and they were all on swivel chairs and he had to teach all of them, and then 30 went next door to do an activity. And it was really hard because his first thing that he said to them was a question. And so I watched, and so some children swiveled in the other direction, some were fiddling with a whiteboard. He didn't have their attention, and so for me that was a wasted opportunity. Instead I would have said, girls and boys, listen, and I would have just delivered some information. Then I would have said, turn to your partner and tell them that. And it seems counterintuitive, but telling kids the answer is actually a part of explicit instruction, and it's way more effective. We also have to make sure if you were nodding off in class that you're thoroughly engaged. So I have to make sure that I have your attention. No attention, no learning whatsoever. Just won't happen. And finally, I need to see what's going on in your head. So I would be having you write something down on a whiteboard. I would be asking you questions because while I'm teaching, I need to know how I'm going, which means knowing how you're going. Do I need to repeat something? Do I need to step up the pace?
Because that's the other thing I would have been quite good at, is nodding and looking like I'm being really good at paying attention.
Oh, we're very good at it as adults, but stop and ask a question and then you'll see straight away.
Yeah. And what are the strategies that teachers are using to keep children's attention in class?
Well, certainly the strategies that I would use, so there's a number of engagement strategies. So they're little things to do that will enable students to stay focused. So your pace of instruction is really important. If you create a void, they will fill it. So keeping up a good pace, and there's actually statistics on that. So when I'm teaching a class, which I get to do from time to time, even though I work in a university, I want my students to be responding, if it's new material, 6 to 8 times per minute. And if it is a known material, 12 to 14. It's called opportunities to respond.
And what does a response look like?
A response would be everyone might be saying something all together. Okay, so when I say girls and boys, when these 2 letters go together, they say ch. What do they say? Ch. And everyone's saying ch. That's a response.
Right.
Then I might say, Mel, when these 2 letters go together, what do they say? They say ch. That's right. You've had a response as well. So mostly group. We call that choral responding, because if you're responding, there's a good chance that you're paying attention. Okay, you're not
if you know that everyone's going to be having to respond together, you have to pay attention.
Plus, I have pop sticks. I might call on you randomly. I would only do that, though, after you had rehearsed an answer, and you possibly would have had a chat with a partner. So partner pair share we would do a lot of. We would have children being asked to respond individually. We would have choral responding. I would say so, CH in the word this says what, and then I would reverse it and you'd say it back to me. So there are so many ways that I can make it interactive. So it's got to be highly interactive. It's got to be fast paced. We don't do it all day. But when we do it, it's the opportunities to respond where the learning takes place. It's not me explaining at the beginning or testing you at the end. It's the bit in the middle when everyone's practicing together.
I mean, I ask this because I think, although, as a parent, it's not something that I'm thinking, okay, well, this is how I'm going to be with my son at home. I don't think that's necessarily something I
tried
need
it with
to
my
do.
son. It didn't work, and I'm good at it, so no.
Yeah, but it's useful, I think, for parents to understand that this is part of the change in instruction, that the science, I guess, that has gone into it, and the work that teachers are doing to understand this instruction, because otherwise, I feel perhaps as a parent, if I didn't know this, then I wouldn't have really had a full understanding of what teachers are doing.
It's interesting. I just looked at the new curriculum documents that have come out here, and science of learning is there. What does science of learning means? It means that we've got better over time at understanding the fragility of the human brain and how challenging it is to learn something new. So if we accept that, we know that the human brain is really easily overwhelmed. So if you step into your car and it's raining heavily and you've got children in the back seat, and first thing you'll do is turn off the radio, tell them to be quiet. You're trying to control the environment because there's a lot going on. That's cognitive load. And when it's overloaded, you can't really function. So if we go back to the writing example, if you're trying to write a sentence and you are struggling to form letters, spell words, then you are going to be really overloaded, and that's going to impact on your learning. So we know that by breaking things down into small chunks, providing multiple opportunities for practice, checking in to see how the students are going, that is the kindest way of helping that human brain to learn. And so when we talk about science of learning, it's research on cognitive load theory, it's research on desirable difficulties. So it's okay if it's hard sometimes. It's really okay. We just need to push through that. because once you've pushed through it, you've learnt it. So there are lots of new understandings that are coming around that certainly are informing good teaching practice these days.
Wow. Okay. Well, you have been a wealth of knowledge, as I promised in the introduction. Lorraine, thank you so much for being here with us on School Shorts, and thank you. I know you're coming. The reason you're here in New Zealand is to speak with a lot of teachers too. So I'm sure they're going to find your wisdom very useful.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If that topic was helpful for you and you'd like to hear more, please do like and subscribe. It sends me that feedback. School Shorts is all about supporting busy parents who want their children to thrive. Follow on social at School Shorts NZ for fun ideas, helpful resources, and exclusive giveaways.